Okay, thanks for joining us, everybody. As we get started here, my name is Chuck Ridgway. I'm the Automation Technology Manager at Horner, and there's four of us from the factory today. Let's start with our Product Manager, Casey Gardner. How are we doing today, Casey?
Doing pretty good. How's it going, Chuck?
Going well. So Casey's responsible for product management at Horner. And so he's the guy when it comes to planning out products for the future and really having a solid knowledge of our current products. Also joining us is Mr. Nate Beachy, who is our applications engineer extraordinaire. How are we doing today, Nate?
Good afternoon. I'm doing all right.
Nate is the one who did most of the programming for the chart recorder product and user documentation and all that sort of stuff. So Nate will probably be the one answering the questions, right, Nate?
Yes, you get to blame me if anything's wrong.
There you go. Excellent. And then finally, we have Marcy Tyree, our marketing guru. How are we doing today, Marcy?
I'm great, Chuck. Thanks.
Awesome. All right, let's dive right in. And again, thanks for joining us today. So our agenda today is obviously to introduce this new chart recorder product to you. So we're going to do a quick review of what is Horner Solutions, because Horner Solutions products are a little different than just the straight Horner automation products. I want to describe those differences to you so you'll kind of understand that. We're going to also talk about a little bit traditional paper chart recorders and where they fit and how those are used. And then, of course, we'll dive into this new electronic chart recorder from Horner Solutions. We'll talk about different applications where they can be used, how you can buy it, and then we're going to go through what technical resources are available to you if you want more information. And of course, we'll have questions and answers. You don't have to wait until the end to type in your questions. Feel free to type those in at any time and we'll get those answered. All right, here we go. Let's dive right in. Okay, let's talk just for a minute about Horner Solutions. So Horner Automation, we are a manufacturer of automation products. So all-in-one controllers, which is a PLC with a built-in HMI. We have lots of I/O products. We have a lot of general automation products that generally need to be installed and programmed in the field before they can really do anything. So you add your own intellectual property to those and make them part of a system. Horner Solution products are products that are ready to deploy. So they're built upon standard Horner automation components, but they're actually prepackaged, pre-programmed, and ready to deploy. And basically, ready to deploy means that you only need to physically install them. Any setup that is required is done from the touchscreen. So there's no Cscape programming or any other programming that's ever required, strictly configuration from the touchscreen. Okay, so next, let's talk just for a minute about traditional paper chart recorders. Okay, so, a paper chart recorder might look a little bit like the one there on the picture I've got here on the slide. It might look a little bit different, but in general, these are instruments that are designed to continuously record analog signals. And the whole idea there is to provide a historical record for a particular signal, whether it's a key process parameter or something else. And they've been used in a number of industries over the years, and they're still in use today. But again, their primary function is to provide a historical record in the form of a paper record, which is obviously the chart paper that ultimately is removed and archived to show, what the specific process parameters were on a specific time and date through the form of a paper record. Now, the Horner Solutions chart recorder is designed to replace those sorts of solutions, those old-fashioned traditional paper chart recorders, with a solution that's quite a bit more modern. And they have a lot more functionality than just a couple of pens that are recording analog values to a piece of paper, whether that's circular or otherwise. So the chart recorder has 4 analog inputs maximum that can be used. You can think of that as 4 pens. You can display the current value, of course. You can see what the current value is, and we have a number of different ways that current value can be displayed. It still is there to record historic values because that's what a chart recorder needs to do, but it does that graphically in the form of a trend on the screen, just a trend graph on the screen, and it does that electronically by recording the data digitally to a data file on a micro SD card. And it records it in the form of a CSV file, which can easily be used in a spreadsheet program, for instance. It provides local alarm capability. So if you want to not only monitor a specific signal or a group of signals, and you want to have a range of acceptable values that are configured into this device and have it alarm when the range is outside of those values, that can be done. And that alarming can be shown locally, and it can also result in an email notification, of a disruption to the process, for instance. And you can also use it for doing on-demand type recording. So it doesn't just have to be used for a signal that's monitored continuously. It can also be used in an environment where you want to periodically perform, let's say, a 10-minute test or a 15-minute test, and you want to record those results accurately and electronically. It can be used for that sort of application as well. Now, when it comes to displaying current values of the analog signals that are being monitored, basically what the unit does is it reads obviously the analog inputs that are connected to the sensors in the field. It basically scales those values based on how the unit was configured from the touchscreen, and we'll review that or how that's done here in a minute. And then it displays on the screen the process parameter in the engineering units in which you would like to display it. So whether that's pressure or PSI or temperature or whatever the case may be, that scaled value is displayed on the screen, and you can display it numerically as a bar graph in a gauge object, or again, on a trend object as well. So there's lots of ways that you can display the current value of that key process parameter that you're recording. Now, if we take a closer look at the way data is displayed on the screen, we're looking at real-time data here, and we're looking at the numeric type display that has some horizontal bar graphs also associated with it. You can see that when you're looking at that on the screen, you've got a custom label for each of the process parameters. Is it inlet pressure or tank level or whatever your specific process parameter is? It can display the 24-hour average for that particular parameter. Obviously, it's got a numeric value and a bar graph that is shown there. And then on the right-hand side, and this applies to just about every screen and not just your numeric data display, but it also has icons and other screen navigation and status indicators that you can see there on the right. So it'll show the current time and date. If you're doing a special recording, if you're running a special test, maybe a 10-minute test or something, it has a recording indicator that will effectively, through its graphics, if you will, it will show you that, hey, a recording is currently going on. It's got an alarm indicator, which is also used as a way of quickly navigating to an alarm screen, so you can see alarm details. And then if you want to look at the process parameters in a different way, maybe you want to look at the trend graph or you want to look at a gauge view, then there is a navigation button that you can use to switch views very quickly. And then there's also a setup icon that you can use to set everything up. Now, you can password protect this unit so that it's not just anybody can go to the setup screen and change things around, but by default, it is not password protected, at least not out of the box. And then if we're going to take a look at your process parameters, your process data in a trend view, you've got, again, on the left-hand side, you've got your 4 different process parameters there, or your process values shown from top to bottom in numeric form. And then those areas over there to the left, those double as push buttons, if you will. So if you want to take a look at the trend graph for that third parameter from the top there, which I believe is temperature, then when that button is pressed, it's going to show in the trend portion of the display, it's going to show the current trend for that particular process value. And then from a time fence standpoint, you can then along the bottom, you can select the time fence for that particular analog value, whether it's 1 hour, 8 hour, 24 hour, or 7 days. So again, you got a lot of flexibility in terms of how you display the data and, to what time fence you're using at any given moment. Now, if we take a look at configuration, again, the whole idea behind Horner Solutions products is that you don't have to get out any kind of configuration software or go through any ladder logic or IEC programming. All you really need to do is navigate the touchscreen from the setup menus and go in and just set things up. So let's take a look at what the channel configuration looks like on the unit. Along the left-hand side there, you can type in a custom name or label for each of your 4 analog inputs. In this case, we've got pressure as the top one on the upper left. You can also type in the engineering units, whether it's PSI or bars or whatever the particular analog value has in terms of engineering units, you can type those in as well so that you're looking at everything, where it makes sense from an engineering unit standpoint. On the upper right-hand corner there, you can see that for each of the 4 channels, you can configure the input type. Is it a 4 to 20 milliamp raw input signal coming into that first channel there? Or are you going to connect a RTD PT100 to that channel instead? Because that's an option as well. PT100 sensor, temperature sensor, at least of limited temperature range, -50 to +200. If you need a wider temperature range than that, then you can use an RTD transmitter connected to 4 to 20 milliamps and display it that way. So you can select the type of signal coming in, and then you can also remap which analog input is being displayed as channel 1, 2, 3, or 4. You can have the same analog input mapped to 2 different channels that are maybe scaled slightly differently. You could do that if you wanted to. So you've got a lot of flexibility there. And then you can also configure how frequently am I going to data log that particular analog input to the memory card. How often am I going to sample it? Every 30 seconds, every minute, every 5 minutes, whatever makes sense for your particular process. And then how often am I going to recalculate the average? You can also configure that as well. Okay, so that's your channel configuration. Now, in addition to that sort of configuration, you also have the ability, and it's important, of course, to be able to scale each particular channel to engineering units. So let's say, for instance, we've got a pressure sensor, and that pressure sensor has a 4 to 20 milliamp output. And let's say that at 4 milliamps, it represents 10 pounds per square inch. And at 20 milliamps, it represents 100 pounds per square inch. So on the raw input side, in this case, you would configure the minimum and the maximum value of the A to D conversion for that input channel. And generally, with this product, 0 is going to be the minimum and 32,000 is going to be the maximum. So those are kind of the raw digital converted values coming in from the sensor. And then the next column over, you can configure the minimum and maximum engineering units. So for 10 to 100 pounds per square inch, our minimum or low would be 10, and our max or high would be 100. And these are floating point values, so you're going to get good resolution and good results on the scaling. And then you've got a couple of things you can configure. You can configure how many decimal points you want to display on the screen, how many digits to the right of that decimal point. And if you get a slightly negative value as a calculation, is that something you want to display as a slightly negative value, or do you just want to display that as a 0? Sometimes that can happen at the very low end of a sensor. Its output may be slightly below 4 milliamps, for instance, and it might be interpreted as a negative in that case. But you can handle all that. And then independently of how you scale the input side to engineering units, you can decide the low and the high limit for how you want to graph the data. So maybe in our example where it's 10 to 100 pounds per square inch, maybe we're really only interested in graphing between 10 and 30 PSI. So we can decide, okay, we're just going to graph between 10 and 30 because we know in our particular application that sensor is never going to get above 30, for instance. So these are some of the scaling parameters that you can access here from the touchscreen. And then you have alarm capability if you want to take advantage of that. So for each of the 4 channels, you have up to 4 alarm levels that you can configure. You've got alarm low and alarm high, and then you've got a warning low and a warning high. And if you really only care about one particular warning level or one particular alarm level, you don't have to configure all 4. You can configure as many or as few as you want. And then in addition to setting up the levels for each of the, up to 4 alarm points, you can also configure a delay. So if you want to alarm, let's say, at 50 pounds per square inch, but you don't want to delay until maybe 5 seconds after you hit 50 pounds per square inch, then you could set up an alarm delay of, say, 5,000 milliseconds or something. So that's a settable parameter as well. Now, this unit has the ability to do some networking functions as well. We'll talk about that here in a minute. So if you're going to take advantage of the networking capability, the Ethernet capability, then of course you need to configure its IP address and network mask and any default gateway if the unit needs to exit the local facility and go through a firewall or something. And of course you need to have the facility to change time and date because this guy is going to, of course, be time stamping things as you go. In addition to that, if you want to take advantage of alarming via email or maybe delivering log files via attachment on an email, then of course you're going to need to configure email. Configure both the email server, what server is the chart recorder going to get in touch with, or log into when it needs to send an email. And then, of course, you need to have a place where you can type in the email addresses where messages are going to be sent. So that all is handled from the touchscreen here on this particular screen. Now, one of the extra capabilities this unit does have, which is quite handy, is this custom recording function. So again, if you're maybe in a test bench type scenario or in another application where you're going to be running periodic tests of a limited duration, then it's very handy that this product supports that. So the process is effectively a 5-step process from beginning to end. When you're ready to run a test, a special test, you're going to go in and set that up. What is the duration of the test? What triggers the start of the test? Once you've got that configured, it's going to ask you to confirm the details that you've configured. Once you've done that, the test is going to start. And while the test is running, there in step 3, there on the screen, I've kind of circled the record indicator that will be changing its appearance so that it's obvious that there's a recording going on. And then once the recording is complete, or well, actually during the recording process, if you want to see what the status of things happens to be, you can press that record button and it will take you to a record status screen telling you how long is left in the recording process and that sort of thing. And then at the end, the unit will effectively tell you the file location on the memory card where you can find the electronic results for the test that you just ran. So that's also very, very convenient so that you'll know exactly where on that memory card you can extract that particular file. Now, there's a number of things that are recorded, not just the routine trending information for the forward process parameters, not just alarms and special recordings. There's a lot of things that are recorded, and it's organized in a file structure on the micro SD card. And as you drill down in each of those folders, you can see the CSV files that can easily be converted into spreadsheet files. And then, of course, as you look at the data on your spreadsheet, you can see, of course, all the details for that particular record. Now, there's multiple ways in which you can deliver these files. They can be manually copied from the memory card. Of course, that's the lowest technology method. You can pull the files off the memory card electronically over Ethernet using FTP, which is File Transfer Protocol. And then in some cases, some of the files can actually be delivered via email as file attachments. So that's another approach for delivering some of the files. Now, in addition to that Ethernet functionality that I just described in terms of like pulling and pushing files, for instance, there's also the ability to connect the chart recorder to your factory network. Maybe you've got a third-party PLC and an Ethernet IP network somewhere in your plant, and you'd like to get these 4 process analog values on a quick, fast basis into that existing control system. You can very easily do that using Ethernet IP. So this chart recorder is an Ethernet IP I/O adapter. So it's very easy to get those analog values real time into an existing PLC over that protocol. And then it also supports Modbus TCP IP as a server, which means, again, if you want to get those process variable values into a SCADA package or a different PLC or somewhere else using Modbus protocol, Modbus TCP protocol, you can do that without any difficulty. So it's got connectivity built right into it. Now, if you'd like to remotely view the process parameters, not look at the trends, but if you want to remotely view the current values, you can do that from a web browser, either in the plant or potentially even outside the plant, with the appropriate firewalls in place. And so the support for what Horner calls WebMI is built into the chart recorder. And again, let's say that you are in the maintenance department and, you get a notification on your phone via email, let's say, that says, hey, we've got an alarm condition on, we've got a temperature alarm on our oven, for instance. So you might get an email in that regard from the chart recorder. Well, you could hop on your web browser right from your phone and take a look at the details of what that specific temperature was, when it went into alarm and that sort of thing. So there's plenty that you can do remotely if that's important to you using the electronic chart recorder. Now, in terms of the applications where this product can be used, really, it's really any application where you've got a key process parameter that you want to monitor, whether that's temperature or pressure that represents a tank level or an oven temperature or really any other quality type measurement. And again, you can do more than just record the data. You can set up alarm levels so you can be notified whenever you do have an alarm condition. And then another scenario that I hear mentioned a few times is, in some facilities where they might have 2 or 3 key process parameters that need to be monitored, by running those signals into a single device where they can easily monitor and record values, it's a lot easier than having a maintenance person kind of, navigate through the facility and crawl down into the crawl space or up into the attic or something to look at a specific gauge on an instrument to try and see what's going on. Having it all, centrally located and logged in one location could be pretty convenient. And then, of course, environmental monitoring is an application where it's very valuable. So there are plenty of manufacturers who, for instance, are discharging water into either a body of water or maybe a municipal water system. And there are regulatory requirements, things that, parameters, water quality metrics that have to be measured and logged, and reports that have to be submitted, those sorts of things. And having a device like this makes that very straightforward. Okay, so for the reports that need to be generated on a regular basis, they can be based off real recorded timestamp data and not handwritten notes, for instance. There's just a lot of convenience for this sort of component, especially when you think about the fact that if it's a facility that doesn't have a SCADA system, for instance, already existing, this is a much more inexpensive approach than a SCADA system might be, and especially easy to get up and running quickly. You've got a single box, you install the box, you wire your sensors, you set a few parameters from the touchscreen, and away you go. Now, in terms of how to buy it, there's 2 different forms in which you can purchase the chart recorder solution. You can purchase it as a pre-packaged solution. In other words, pre-installed in a control panel, a UL508 control panel, where everything is pre-wired. So all you have to do is physically mount the enclosure, add AC power to the appropriate field terminals inside the box, connect up to 4 sensors to the appropriate terminals inside the box, power the unit up, set a few settings from the touchscreen, and you're up and going right away. So if that's something that's interesting to you, the part number is shown there on the screen. And then you should probably contact us at sales@heapg.com, and we can answer any questions you have. We can put you in touch with the appropriate person who can get you a quote, or maybe even a demonstration unit or something like that, or evaluation unit. We can talk about different options, but the first step would be to contact that email there, sales@heapg.com. And I will assure you, we have very responsive sales folks that are monitoring this email continuously. So a lot of companies, I know sometimes the old sales mailbox just kind of all dusty and nobody ever pays attention to it, but that's definitely not the case here at Horner. Okay, and then the other way you can buy this product is buy it as a component. So maybe you want to install it in your own enclosure and you would prefer just to buy it as a component, and you can do that. So it'll come basically, as you see on the screen there, as a unit that's pre-programmed. It's already ready to install, but you need to physically install it in your own control panel, add your own wiring, add your own field terminal strip and power and those sorts of things. And for that guy in that form, it's got the part number there on the screen. But once again, the next step would be, if you're interested, would be to contact that same sales@heapg type email address. Now, we've got a lot of technical resources available if you are interested in getting more information. The website to go to is Horner Solution, non-plural, hornersolution.com. And you'll find the product page for the chart recorder there on that particular website, along with a couple other products as well. From that product page, you can download the cut sheet, which I will mention is going to be available for a few more minutes on the handouts tab during our webinar. Okay, so that has obviously additional information you can investigate there. There's a user's manual, of course, with all the details on how to set it up and all the detailed specifications and those sorts of things. There's also 4 really concise, nice videos available on the product page that'll tell you everything about, how to set the unit up, how to set up the networking portion of things, how warnings and alarms work, details about, specific details about how to do special recordings. So those are all nice short videos, nice and concise, that can get you up and running in no time. And then we also have a couple of recordings from our live streams that we do here every week at Horner. There's one that we did back in September, which was a kind of a product tour of the chart recorder live with Nate Beachy. So that's one I would recommend you check out if you haven't done so already. And then finally, we had another video related to the chart recorder solution we did last month, and that was one in which we had a process industry expert talk about how manufacturers who have to discharge effluent into water systems, whether they're bodies of water or municipal water systems, how some of the metrics that they need to measure when it comes to water quality, and how a component like this one can be invaluable in helping them do their reporting and that sort of thing. So that's one I would definitely recommend for sure. Okay, so if you have any questions, now would be the time for us to take a look at this. And I'm going to let Nate I'm going to read the question and I'm going to let Nate kind of pipe in on the answer here. So let's start with the first question. This was from Josh. He was asking, how long does this product store data?
Yep, that stores data on the micro SD card and it does not automatically go away. So that means one of two things is, first of all, it doesn't go away by itself. And second of all, if the micro SD card fills up due to however many weeks or years of data logging that's happened, then it will not erase old data. It will give a fault, actually. So the answer there is that it doesn't go away until you make it go away in some fashion or another.
Yeah, and in reality, if we did the math, let's say you're using a 16 gigabyte micro SD card, which you can find just about anywhere, and I think we ship it with either a 16 or a 32. I mean, it's literally going to be years and years and years of recording, probably in excess of 20 years before it would fill up a micro SD card of that size. So yeah, so it doesn't overwrite any old data is a good short answer. Okay, so here's a question from Abundio. Let's see if it's got lots of details here. Let me see if I can figure it out here. Okay, are there sensors? Oh, he's telling us there are sensors that have built-in data logging. Is that what Abundio is saying here, Nate?
Well, I'm not sure how I read that in the first there, but my answer to that was that any sensor that puts out a 4 to 20 milliamp signal will work with this, as well as PT100 RTDs.
That's right. Yeah. So let's go ahead and handle it that way. So so it doesn't really matter what sensor it is, as long as it has a 4 to 20 milliamp output, and it can't be a 0 to 10 volt output or a 1 to 5 volt output or something like that. But as long as it has a 4 to 20 milliamp output, then that sensor can be used with the chart recorder. And then the only other sensor that can be directly connected would be an RTD PT100 sensor. And in that scenario, if you directly connect the RTD to the chart recorder, it will record directly just fine, but it has a limited temperature range of -50°C to +200. So if the temperatures you're measuring are going to fall outside of that range, you would use an external temperature transmitter that would take a standard RTD, convert it to 4 to 20 milliamps, and then you would run the 4 to 20 milliamps into the unit. But as long as your temperature range is within -50 to +200°C, you could use that temperature sensor directly.
Right. And yeah, 4 to 20 milliamp signals are basically a very standard industrial signal to measure in analog inputs. So there's plenty of options out there for sensors and transducers and converters from whatever you're trying to measure into that 4 to 20 milliamp signal.
Right. Exactly. Now, in the future, we might be adding support from some other sensor types, possibly maybe some pulse type sensors, that sort of thing. But for now, 4 to 20 milliamps and then RTD is where the product functionality is limited today. But that's not all that limiting, obviously, given the commonality of 4 to 20 milliamps. Okay, so it looks like that's the questions we got for today. Thank you.
There are a couple of new ones there, but I think we answered one of them already.
Okay, well, go ahead, Nate. I'll let you kind of read and answer then.
Yep, Ernie asks us what the interface is to measure 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. So not the direct temperature input, but there should be conversions out there, whether it be a thermocouple or an RTD of some sort to 4 to 20 milliamp converter of some device. And then you plug that 4 to 20 milliamp into this, and it would be able to record that.
Yeah, and you could scale it without any problem. Now, for 2000 degrees, if we're talking 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, we're probably talking about a thermocouple in that case, because RTDs generally top out at about 850°C, which is not that hot. So
right. Yep. And then the other question was about supporting IO-Link sensors. And I don't know that I have an answer to that.
Yeah, so our general purpose automation products can certainly support IO-Link. In 2023, we released some IO-Link Master products that they're basically products we've partnered with Banner Engineering for. And we've got those products that would allow you to connect IO-Link sensors, but we haven't actually added IO-Link capability to the chart recorder. But at Horner, we're always willing to listen to ideas. So if that became a very prevalent requirement, that's something we would certainly entertain.
Correct. Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the future ideas for an expanded version, I guess, of the chart recorder, rather than just having 4 channels, is up to like 32 channels. And most likely through an IO-Link type of situation like that would be one way to do that.
Sure.
There is one more question that just came in. Are flow meters usable with this unit? With the pulse output, not currently. There's talk of also adding a pulse input to these, which is a common question, I think, a common desire. So that's a known thing. It does not currently do that, I guess, unless you have a flow meter, of course, that can plug into a 4 to 20 milliamp transducer to bring into this. What it will not do is do any totalizing of the flow, but it would be able to give you the flow rate or whatever that sensor is trying to tell you there.
Right. And I would say that it's fairly likely that at some point in the future, we would add pulse flow meter type functionality. But again, that's not definitive in terms of when we would do that. So don't want to overcommit there. But it's definitely something we've talked about pretty extensively.
Yep. And that's the end of the questions I see.
Okay, terrific. Well, those are some great questions. And thanks everybody for joining us today. Before I sign off, I do want to remind you that we have a live stream every Tuesday at 2:00. So we release a new video every Tuesday. It's usually on a technical topic of some sort. Sometimes, or very often, it's related to the Horner automation products, how to program them, how to do a certain application, how to connect a certain type of sensor, those sorts of things. Sometimes it's on industry general topics such as, different Ethernet protocols and that sort of thing. And this upcoming Tuesday, our next topic is we're going to be talking about string handling and the structured text language. So Cscape, which is our programming package on the automation side of things, handles both ladder logic as well as the full IEC programming suite. Structured text is one of those languages, and we're going to talk specifically about how you handle strings with structured text languages when you're using IEC in Cscape. So if you can make that, that would be wonderful. But of course, if you don't watch our live streams while they're live, no big deal. You can always watch them on replay from our YouTube channel or from our website. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us, and everybody get out there and do you some good.